The evil never dies. Standard. A full moon paints long shadows in a small bedroom. The boy shivers beneath his covers, a deep growl rising from beneath his bed. He cannot move, frozen in place, praying for his mother as the bedroom door slowly squeaks open. A hulking shadow spills down the wall, lurches into the hall. The growl only grows louder. The boy fights the terrible growl lodged inside his head. He sees the heavy carved frame of his parents' bed. Flooded with relief, he grasps in the darkness for mother. But the hands he sees are beastly bloody claws. Mother turns to him, face contorted in terror, her throat gashed open. The boy's own scream wakes him. He's still in his bed. But the taste of blood is on his tongue as the shadow's beast returns to him. His father's wail pierces the silence. The boy can still see through the gauze wrapped over his face. He is strapped in a chair in his father's library. Tall columns of ancient texts whisper dark secrets, demonic faces contort the heavy covers, and that terrible growl begins once more. The darkness is returning. He can make out the priest entering the room, must warn him. But he suddenly cowers from the man's chanting. He gnaws desperately at his straps as the priest reveals his cross. Instantly, the boy snaps free, his frail limbs contort, cracking and doubling over as he scuttles up the bookshelves. Below, the shadow swallows the floor, an abyss of writhing, screaming jaws, hands, tongues, tentacles. The priest is pulled down, ripped apart limb from limb, the cross left next to his severed head. The boy is now a man, strapped in a surgical theater. Voices echo as something tugs at his scarred shut eyes. He is hit with blinding light as a scalpel slices through the dead tissue. Extreme close-up, a pretty doctor smiles comfortingly as she pins his eyes wide open with metal rods. He hears a growl and panics, but it is just a saw blade spinning nearby. He feels the tug on his skull, the saw sinking and churning. The smiling doctor disappears behind him, her face blurring across his permanent stare, seared in his freshly exposed brain. He tries to focus. The silhouette forms clearer, but it is not the doctor. It is mother. The saw is her scream. He cannot look away as her torn throat gapes, head flopping to the side. Black bloody tentacles creep out from her rotten core, reaching for him. Surfing a wave of consciousness, the dull prodding at his brain returns. Must stay awake. He can feel the bright white room once more, but he tastes blood. He sees his own hands, now wooden like a marionette. He is no longer strapped down, not in his own body at all. He is a giant gazing down into the pulsing pink of the man's brain. He pokes the soft pink tissue with his grotesquely long jointed fingers. He skewers the meat, savoring the taste before indulging himself, scraping out the insides in ecstasy. The man contorts in a silent scream as the pretty doctor caresses his cheek in concern. Sunlight flares in the man's eyes. His head is pounding. He is in a room full of easels, paint brushes and warm breeze. The brush slithers across the canvas in front of him, the slick blood-red paint capturing his nightmares. The pretty doctor smiles encouragingly. Open your mind, he no longer has straps or rods. He relaxes and rubs his scarred throbbing skull. But his hands land on an open mouth. He startles as it kisses his hand erotically. A growl escapes the mouth then bites through his hand. The room melts away with his scream, and the painted facade stretches wide. The man throws the easel, crashing out of the art room into the hall, the growl overwhelming his mind. He runs through the painting's bloody landscape, jabbing his ears with the paintbrush in his hand. Must deafen the voices. He skewers his eyes once more. Blood splatters the doctor's white coat as she takes notes. The voices overwhelm his weeping. We must suffer for our art. The room shifts. Time is meaningless. He now stands in a cavernous gallery of art, canvases stretched with bulging, blinking, now bleeding eyes. The doctor holds his hand, encourages him to look. She turns to him, dark and beautiful. She has mother's eyes. The walls blink and throb menacingly. His scalp begins to itch intensely. Scratching the back of his head, a sea of tentacles wriggle, growing large and heavy. His head tilts. The doctor is now mother, rotten and tentacled. He sinks to the floor as it morphs. Now pink and spongy, a human brain. Let go, tentacles writhe and pull him inside, squeezing him, blood gushing from his eyes and mouth. The doctor returns to the gallery admiring the man's nightmare landscapes that now line the walls. T-Man sleeps in a hospital room, thick bandages on his skull. The clock ticks backwards from 3 a.m. A shadow crawls across the door as the growl heightens. He cannot close his eyes, but he is too tired to fight the voices. He lets darkness take over. Open your mind, he sees himself from above, strapped down, eyes pinned white and brain exposed, silently screaming. The shadow slips beneath the bolted door, the voice beckoning. Come find me. The empty hall stretches ahead, and he senses fear in the air, but it is not his own. Echoes of his past haunt the endless hallways and mazes. Mother. Father. Priest. Orphan. His rage grows, the growl deepens. The man is no more, scattering his shadow into an army of monstrosities, slaughtering the demons of his past, the shadow swallowing every nightmare. The doctor smiles and nods as blood cascades across the white hospital floors. Dark creatures crash through bolted doors, devouring any prey in its path. Violent tentacles, gnashing teeth, flaying claws, each monster built to feast on fear. The doctor is in her office, straightening a new piece of art on the wall. The room is a gallery of nightmare paintings, lost gazing eyes and tortured faces. She closes her latest patient file and smiles, smoothing the wrinkles in the fresh lab coat as the sun sets, casting shadow across the room. The shadow crawls across her face as a new patient file flips open. The evil never dies extended. The boy recalls his mother's disappointed face, wincing in pain as he clutches his bandaged fists in fear. He promised a pretty doctor he wouldn't chew his nails past the quick, but the pills don't stop the nightmares. He didn't mean to gnaw down to the bone. And he hadn't slept in 5 days when he cut his eyelids off with mother's best sewing scissors. Anything to stay awake. Mother's eyes are dead as she pulls the straps tight over his bed frame. It's for his own good, she said. Beneath a blue sky, father cannot bear to look at the boy as mother's coffin is lowered into the black earth. The family priest studies the blindfolded boy, his shackled limbs shivering. He reaches to touch him, but the boy thrashes, cursing and screaming as the priest's robe bursts into flame. The sky floods with shadow, bursting with blood-red rain. Father and the priest rush to the safety of the church, abandoning the boy to face his shadow demons. Father finally bashes down the library door as the priest screams relent. The boy is hidden, crying under the desk, blood-red tears seeping through his bandaged face and lidless eyes. The priest's robe lies in tatters on the floor, and father reaches for his son. The boy sits up, the priest's severed head cradled in his lap, the mark of the cross seared, an angry red on his palms. The tentacles burst into the hollows of his eyes. Darkness. Panic, terror. He is the boy again, hidden in the corner of a murky cell. A rusted iron bedframe and a rotting apple on an old tray, the orphanage. The walls are defiled with crude carvings, the ancient runes from his father's book. The walls command him to stand, chains clanking at his ankles. He carves through his pain. When the knife drops away, the bloody pentacle is cut into his chest. The blood drips into his hand. The voice chants from within, feast on fear. Destroy it before it destroys you. The shadow seeps back beneath the man's door watching him sleep. He wakes with a start as the shadow beast rises up before him. As the beast's fangs sink into his neck, he opens his eyes in understanding. The doctor looks through the small window and smiles as the man is dissected by a sea of monsters, his mind devoured whole. For a moment, her eyes blacken, the shadow of a writhing tentacle between her lips, slithering away beneath her door. She explores the ancient rift between worlds, waking and sleeping, light and dark consuming each other. She reaches out to the sleeping boy and whispers, "Open your mind." The evil never dies directors upon father's desk, a great tome still whispers to the boy. Through the gauzy bandages, he sees the pages flipping, ancient runes burning into his mind before the book snaps shut. A demon presses its sneering face through the back cover. It licks its lips, mocking the boy. He can't help but understand its language. The alarm bell drowns his screaming, someone is trying to unlock the cell. The boy smears the blood over the walls, painting the shadow demons that haunt him. The nurses try to calm him, restrain him. He tries to warn them to read the signs. The needle punctures his arm. When he comes to, the cell door hangs open and the hall sprawls into shadows and a trail of blood. The crude knife drops from his hand as the boy runs. Every turn reveals another hole, another corpse. The shadow chases him as he throws himself through the stained glass window to the streets far below. Her voice echoes softly, "Open your mind." The man is now a boy, eyes scarred, the world in dim black and white once more. "Tell me about your mother." The boy shakes, flashes of dead eyes, the shadow beast tears at his mother's jugular as she stares in anger. "You must face the darkness." The eyes are the window to the soul. Whose voice is it? Mother? Thick tentacles explode from the pristine white floor, strangling the boy. The doctor smiles and makes a note. He wakes suddenly, back in the white room. Relief floods his body, the doctor's voice comforting him. "Why must you suffer?" He opens his eyes to find her hovering above him, his brain exposed beneath the hot lights. "There are no shadows here." She strokes his scalp in tenderness before dipping her painted finger into his brain, tasting it with delight. The rods on his eyes force him to watch as he screams in terror. "Let me in," the doctor smiles proudly. "You have finally let go. This is the end of your suffering." A giant bloodshot eye looks in through her office window, pressed up on the glass, lashes of tentacles beckoning. "This is the window to your soul." A full moon paints long shadows in a small bedroom. The boy wakes with a start, covered in sweat, a beast's deep growl, lost to his nightmares. He closes his eyes once more. Just a nightmare. He drifts back to sleep as his father's heavy leather-bound book slips to the floor, falling open. The shadow slips from the room.